Folks, welcome back to a brand new season of the Made to Pray podcast. It's been a wee while since we've been with you, but we're absolutely delighted to be bringing you some new content. And I'm absolutely delighted to have a brand new production team on board with me, and I'll tell you more about them later on. But tonight, I am joined by two members of the County Grand Lodge of Belfast. As you'll know, after a few episodes I did previously, I had a bit of a baby bonnet around the bonds register and everything, and we've had a number of conversations around it, and I thought it would be great to give you a bit of an update on what has happened there. So delighted to have my two guests with me. So I'm going to switch the name and ask them just to introduce themselves. Fellas, welcome along to Made to Pray. Tell us who you are.
I'm Spencer Beattie, the County Grand Master of Belfast. I'm accompanied with Paul McMichael, who is the County Grand Secretary of Belfast.
Brilliant. Absolutely delighted to have you on board. Spencer, maybe a good place for us to maybe tell us just a bit about the role that you play then as County Grand Master. What does that actually entail?
County Grand Master of Belfast is an all-encompassing position which takes in responsibility for the 8 districts, or the 9 districts, sorry, and then whatever the parading issues are, whatever just in general terms is involved in the Orange Institution in Belfast, specifically to Belfast.
You know. Okay. And Paul, you're the secretary. What does that entail for you then?
So I think Spencer, I think he undersold himself there. He's got an immense job, and he covers everything right across the complete spectrum of the County Grand Lodge. So everyone thinks that Orange men go out every year and maybe 1 or 2 parades, and that's that. And that's really not the case at all. Spencer deals with conflict areas where we would have parades coming into sensitive areas. He would be regular contact with a number of community groups trying to develop Orangeism in general within Belfast, as well as a range of other roles. Now, obviously, in order for him to be able to do that, he needs to have a team of people around him, a team of officers around him that would effectively look after him. So in my role, I work within the Secretariat of Belfast County, and there's a team of us, and our job is there to provide administrative support and organisational support, not just for Spencer, but for the rest of the officers as well.
Okay, brilliant. So we're obviously here to talk a wee bit about the sort of relationship, I suppose, between the order and bonds, and specifically a few things that have developed over the last lot of months. But maybe it'd be good for me here for both of you about what do you think the relationship between the order and the bonds should actually be like?
I've always believed the bonds are work in tandem with the institution. And I think anyone who knows me will know that I have had a very active part in working with all the bands in Belfast for whatever difficulties they've had. I always try to stand beside them in any case or any place where they're running into difficulties with the law or anything along that line. And also, in fairness to the bands in question, have always stood foursquare with me in all the protests, etc., that we've been involved in. So I've always liked to think that I've had a very strong relationship with the bands, and I see them as an integral part of the institution when we go out to demonstrate.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's important, especially now in regards to all of the things relating to culture and how things are playing out at the minute, that there is a greater sense of collaboration between all the different sort of elements that are within the culture. And I think that, that's one of the things that it kind of has encouraged me over the last couple of months in regards to there being a greater sense of engagement there. Talk to us a wee bit about where that has all come from, because obviously for me, people who have been watching this will know that obviously I went to town on a document that was produced in regards to the bonds register. But it's actually worked out to be a half decent thing because it's opened up a line of communication between some members of the bonds and yourselves in regards to dealing with that. Maybe it'd be a good place for you to talk about a bit where that document actually came from, because I know in terms of having spoken to you, there was a sense that it tried to come from a good place, that it wasn't necessarily to be, be seen as negative. Unfortunately, that was a slightly different interpretation from people who read it and so on. But talk to us a wee bit about how this kind of has developed into something a lot more positive.
I think in context of last year, when the document was an internal document that was supposed to be a discussion document for ourselves, out, and it would cascade out from our through our hierarchical system. It would cascade out for people to feed into it, to come back to us with what their suggestions. But inadvertently, it got, like a lot of things that happened last year, it got broke without an explanation. And I've always believed we needed first get a buy-in from the institution where everybody was on the same page, and then take that document with us and go and meet with the band fraternity. Did it work? No, it didn't work last year. It became a real contentious issue internally, but spanning with other issues that were happening last year, and it just was a pretty poor outlook for the institution and our relationships with the public and bands and everybody. So together, we came together and we decided what our way forward with that would be, and that was total engagement with the bands, with the general public, with all facets of our culture and our heritage, and that spawned some quite frank discussions, including ones with yourselves, but we see ourselves, back to what I said at the very start, we see ourselves as part of, not a part of, and I mean not to be put aside, or we're in a better position than what the bands are. It was absolutely something that needed an engagement from the bands. The podcast that you made spawned a thought for us that we needed to engage quicker. Now, there's no question in my mind that we would have engaged with the document, but because of the negative publicity that it got, we had to then look at that to see how we could then make it agreeable to us all. The interesting thing to it that did highlight out that, the band register as was out last year is signed by all bands that come with us on Black Saturday. Now, whilst it's two separate orders altogether, but it was something that was already there. The register part of it, probably the instructions that came with it. I hate using the word protocol because it's really a bad word in Northern Ireland at this minute in time. But what you're doing, what we had then was a document which was probably too prescriptive. So we had to look at the document rather than the register. Yeah. One worked in tandem with the other. The register really wasn't, I don't believe, was the main contentious issue. I believe the main contentious issue that we had was the document that was out, which was an agreed position that we found ourselves in, but not necessarily supported by the band fraternity. Yeah. So that's why we're here now.
Yeah, no, and I think, were you surprised though with the kind of the negative backlash that some of that prescriptive language took? I mean, I know after having spoken to you and stuff, you definitely, we're trying to clarify that where, the motivation behind it, where it come from. And I know in the conversation we had with going, that motivation didn't really come across in the language that was put across. But what I'm saying is, were you surprised at the level of negativity that came from the bands?
I think every time something happens, you learn a lesson out of it. And I think the lesson would have been engagement first before, but you have to give us some latitude in that because it was an internal document. Yeah. And it really shouldn't spawn the discussion prior to us going to the bands and saying, guys, here's where we are. Yeah. Now, we would have changed that. All discussion documents are just exactly that, discussion documents. So we would have looked at that, had a conversation, and then moved on from that. Yeah. And probably, I would like to think we'd have finished up almost in the same position of where we are today. Sadly, we didn't get a chance. Now, there are many circumstances that went on at that time that dictated what was happening.
Yeah, because there was a lot going on at that time, Spencer. There was a lot happening. Like you already mentioned, the fact that the other document was leaked in regards to the potential proposal for or a discussion around a route change as well was something that was there, and I think you were definitely getting it from all sides. There was a lot of a lot of press. There was a lot of chatter around online on the news stations and everywhere about that. And I definitely think you could have done without it all coming at one time, because I know for me, whenever the documents were released, like my phone didn't stop, from the news outlets wanting commentary and stuff like that. Or would you come on and talk about this? And it was real hot news for them. Like, oh, whoa, the Orange Order's thinking about changing the route to the 12th. Whoa, the Orange Order's trying to organise bonds and do all this kind of stuff. And it just seemed to be like one thing after another was hammering you. Was that part of, did you just panic during that, or what? How did you find handling the sort of the amount of attention these things were getting?
Well, look, I don't think at any stage there was any panic. It might have been incredibly uncomfortable for us, probably for about a 2-month period. But there was no panic as such. There had been a huge amount of work that had been put into that proposal, even getting to where it was. It had started back in 2018. There had been a committee set up to review that process. Spencer, whenever he first came in as the County Grand Master, very clearly set out his stall. One of the things, there was many things that he wanted to do. However, one of those things was he wanted to try and enhance the 12th of July, and he wanted to make it as good as he could possibly make it. And he was prepared to grasp nettles, take difficult conversations in order that he could come to a general consensus about how those improvements could be made. Okay. Yeah. But there was no preconception about it should be like this or should be like that. So in 2018, a committee was set up, and that committee worked away. And they worked away until 2022, whenever it was then apparent that I was going to say pressure, but it was apparent that the industrious nature of the work required needed to be stepped up a bit. At which point Spencer then called for a series of summons meetings, and I'm not going to err in
Sure.
public or what we actually did in detail, but suffice to say there was multiple summons meetings involving district officers. There was County Grand Lodge meetings, which involved obviously the members of the County Grand Lodge, and there was correspondence that was sent out to all districts for onward transmission to their private lodges. One of those documents, for example, was a questionnaire where people were asked, how do you see the 12th? What improvements do you think need to be made, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's fair to say that there was a substantial amount of feedback that was gained from that.
Okay.
And based on that, it was distilled down to that proposal. There were, I'm not divulging too much, but to say that there was 13 routes that were examined.
Right, okay.
And really, at the end of the day, that was the proposal that was put forward. But everyone's getting hung up on that actual document itself. Now, it's very, very regrettable because that document was leaked into social media, and it was leaked by people who really didn't have a great understanding of our institution, because as Spencer said, we have to follow certain protocols, and that needed to go down to its members. And in fact, as soon as it was leaked, one of the really negative points that was raised was the fact that our members hadn't yet had the opportunity to review it. Uh-huh. And that was exactly the point. Yeah. Of course they hadn't, because someone had leaked it prior to that. So it was a really uncomfortable time for us, but it was a really telling time. And I have to say, not so much me, because I would be fairly new to role. I'd have been part of the county team prior to that, but I'm new to this role. I thought that the officers weathered an amazing storm. Okay. And it was a storm that probably for a lot of others, they couldn't have done it. And they did that because they were determined that, if they'd made a wrong decision, they would review that wrong decision, no problem. Mm-hmm. But they needed to get to the truth. The only way of getting to the truth was soaking up everything that was being fed back. So We then got ourselves around to August time, got the 12th over and done with, which we always wanted to do. And then we started into a series of engagements. We went out to the districts.
Sure.
And we held road shows, of which all the officer team was involved in again. And it's fair to say that they were fractious. It's fair to say that they were heated.
Uh-huh.
It's fair to say that the feedback was given very, very clearly. And at that stage, I think there was a very clear and a very real understanding that the information which we believed to be correct was in actual fact incorrect.
Okay.
Um,
What information we're talking about? What did you find out was incorrect?
well, there was feedback provided, okay, and I don't want to go into too much of the specifics of it because I'm not going to throw I'm not going to throw anyone under a bus. But there was feedback obtained which suggested that the changes that were put into the document were required, and they were what the lodges wanted.
Okay.
When we started seeing the raft of feedback on social media, especially, we then realised that we might have got that wrong, and that might not have been the position of our lodges or
Okay.
our members. Not only that there, but it was also clear as well that there was a sizable difference between some bands. Some bands were in favour of it, some bands were not in favour of it. But within our institution as members, they were clearly against it. And then, of course, it got round to August. We did the road shows that further cemented that position.
Yeah.
September, October time, we then reviewed and analysed all the information we had. It was overwhelming against the proposal.
Okay.
So it was then decided by, well, Spencer made the arbitrary decision at that stage in conjunction with everything he'd been
What we're
presented.
going to do here is this is essentially the proposals off that document's
it's
off the
over.
table. That's
That's
off the table. Yeah.
That's it. And, you know, if I'm being honest, Glenn, in some respects, it paved the way for the new strategy that Spencer decided to oversee. He wanted to go forward into this year with a completely different MO. He wanted to have a new way of moving forward. And really, that's the reason why we're sitting here now, because
Yeah.
if you'd have said to us last year, we'd have sat here, we'd have been very nervous about exposing ourselves like that.
Well, and I think for me, whenever that happened, whenever the news kind of broke that, hey, listen, that proposal has been that's shelved, you know, and it's almost like it was suspended or something. It was it was the wording that came out and whatever else. And my immediate reaction was, do the same with the bonds register document. Do the same thing, you know. Let's suspend the idea on that there. So let's talk a wee bit about the process that has led up that. So obviously that the decision around the route change gets suspended. We're like kind of going, that's a no go. The feedback from the rank and file here is that's not something that's on the agenda for now. And then we're still left with the fact that the bonds register document is still lurking about, and then there was a number of things that happened that I suppose for me instigated a process of communication between the county and some not representatives, but some concerned band members to kind of have a chat about. Let's have a frank conversation about the content of this document that relates specifically to bonds. What was that like for you?
Well, I think, you know, again, everything needs to be framed in context. So in 2009, the Royal Black Institution, they had produced the bands register. And that bands register was adopted by all bands that would take part in black parades, but certainly within Belfast. And that had been in existence from 2009. So when we took that protocol, that register off the shelf and dusted it, no one at any stage thought there was going to be any issue with it because, again, being honest, it's been around since 2009.
Yeah.
Apart from the odd word changing, I mean, there
No.
had been nothing done in
And I
it.
get that, Paul, but I think for me, I think there's been some elements where there are, and we had this as part of our conversation as well, was that I think that there was times where bonds were signing up to stuff that they weren't fully aware of the ins and outs of the documents and stuff. And I think that whenever we started to engage with people, we mentioned about, well, listen, bonds register that exists with the black and stuff. And a number of the guys that I talk, and I said this, they knew nothing about it. They didn't have any real context in regards to, well, I never seen that. And I never see those details and stuff. So I think for me, in terms of our context from the bonds and stuff, was like kind of going, we never see it. We never seen that. A lot of us never seen the actual wording of that. And we're like kind of going, so has somebody signed us up to something that we have absolutely no clue about? And then when that document broke, we're like kind of going, well, I tell you what, if that's what's in this other thing, then we definitely wouldn't have been for that either. You know, I think the bonds reaction would have been exactly the same if they got the access to that detail.
Look, I think you're right, and I think what I don't think what we all know that happens sometimes is everybody rocks up on the 12th of July. They're told by their secretary, their lodge secretary, or the worshipful master, that's where we're going at half time. This is what we're going to be doing. This is where we're stopping. Blah blah blah. They're told the bare minimum, and not always is all the documents discussed as they indeed should be.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there was people at the time signed up to that particular protocol and not fully understand what they're signing up to.
Yeah.
But look, whilst I completely accept that, I think what the important thing was the band's register when it was reviewed earlier on or late on, sorry, I should say last year, it was clearly identified that it was no longer fit for purpose for us.
Mm-hmm.
An actual fact was a bit of a clumsy document. It was very, very effective for 2009. But it was 2024, and the document had become clumsy by way of construction, and it wasn't really appropriate for what we needed.
Yeah, and the language and stuff as well. The language is very, you know, in terms of, you know, very that very, you know, authoritarian type of approach to the language and stuff, and that. And I think that's where a lot of my issues was like kind of going, I really don't like how this reads. You know, it feels very. For me, it was like from a bonds perspective was I feel like I'm being spoken down to rather than being spoken with, and that was part of my issue. And I know we talked that out and stuff. So talk to us a wee bit about whenever we started having some of these conversations and stuff, because obviously you invited a few of us along to have a conversation around this here, and maybe it'd be good to hear Spencer about, because obviously you were a major part of those conversations and stuff. Whatever the guys the concerned bondsmen were talking to us, what were some of the points that really stood out for you in regards to what they were putting across that made you go, do you know what? Yes, we're considering that this might not be what we need to do, but these guys are making some real valid points here that we need to take on board.
I think when we entered into conversations with the concerned bonds persons, it was quite clear to us in those conversations that the document itself, not the register, you need to take things separate here. The document which was leading to the register was almost too prescriptive, and it was reading probably very authoritative. So we were into a position where we were wanting to have a document that we could get an agreement to what that looks like, and that piece of instruction, if we want to call it that, would then be reading to a bondsperson, to a lodge master, to anybody, to be a cumulative document rather than a prescriptive document. In other words, people with the band captain, sergeant, whatever term we use, and the worshipful master had a point in common where they were all going to be basically singing off the same hymn sheet. In other words, the piece of paper, the document has been brought out along with whatever other conjunctive documents that we need with it. And the conversations that we had then put us into a position where we were able to go away and draft something up, which I believe is out at this minute in time.
It is.
Yeah, the document is out at this minute in time, and I've heard nothing back from anyone regarding it. So it always suggests to me that there's a feel about this year coming forward towards the 12th that is much more positive, much more aligning where we all want to be and having an enjoyable day on the 12th of July, without it's his fault, and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. So the engagement was very, very profitable. I felt I went away with a complete understanding and a better understanding of what the previous document was about and where it maybe was wrong. And that spurred then the changes that went into it.
Yeah.
There is then the second document that would be part of it, and that is the Grand Lodge band contract. But that's not a shock or surprise. That has always been there. That's a document
Yeah.
that's always been about.
Uh-huh.
And it comes to us from our hierarchy, so we have no
Yeah.
other option but to deal with that. So the two together in conjunction with the band contract and the new formulated document means that we are comfortable in what arrangements we have with the bands going forward this
Yeah.
year. And to credit of the bands who engage with us, the people from the bands who engage with us, it was a collective effort. And I believe that there's everything in it that we need in it to make sure that the day is an enjoyable day for us all.
Yeah, no, I think I agree though, because whatever, I mean, obviously, I got my hands on that as well. I was like going, it was evident straight away that the type of language that was being used was very, very different, you know, in terms of how it spoke about bonds, how it spoke about maybe the requirements that were going to be made of them. But also, I thought, you know, in regards to even some of the things that could have been seen as controversial still within that. I'm talking about the likes of the colours and flags and emblems and things like that there. I think it showed a level of shared responsibility, whereas in the previous document it felt like finger pointing. You know, it's like going, like you were mentioning, Spencer, about this idea, it's your fault. Well, the flags is your thing. But I think the way that it's worded is that everybody has a responsibility to ensure that we are adhering to the guidelines that are set up by the Praise Commission for the display of flags and albums and stuff. And I think that whenever bonds, I know for me, whenever I talked to some of the guys on bonds about that, that was one of the things that they mentioned was this feels like a completely different approach. And one of his is like, thank God the Orange have had a change of heart because this reads a hell of a lot better. It's got to be good to hear that though as well, because I know you're saying not hearing stuff is good, but also hearing the fact that people going, it's a million miles away from that. And I know it was described to me, it's a million miles away from that other thing. You know, so that's the way it was described, was that other thing, and but also it just felt like a completely different approach, and I think that gives people hope. I think even for, I know you said that the contract comes down from the Grand Orange laws in regards to them, but I think, and I'm not going to try and put you on the spot, but I think there's scope then for that also to have a bit of a look and a rethink around that there, because one of the things that I've noticed around that is that even because you know what the jungle drums in terms of whenever there was a hint that there was a new document coming, and then the next thing you know, a couple of the bonds forums were hit with this document, but it turned out to be the contract, and people were up in arms, like going, I can't believe this. Who do people think they are? I remember having conversations with people going, well, this is the same contract that bonds have been saying for the last 6, 7, 8 years, whatever else. There's the only thing changes on this really has been the date. That's not coming from the county. That comes from the Grand Orange laws, because that's in relation to the 11-bar-1 forms and all those kind of things to make sure that people are compliant and stuff. But it also then reiterated to me that there's also a strong possibility that even with the bond contract, that some bonds are not being presented with that as well. Is that some of them are like going, I have never seen this before in my life. You know, and I think that what it highlights is there, and I think this process highlights as well, is that the level and the quality of the communication between the order and the bonds also needs to increase as well. Is that, I don't know,
Yeah, I think it certainly were. If there was a failure last year, that's where the failure was. The engagement didn't happen before we got the document to people to read it and listen to the feedback. So that aside, uh, we the bond contract is a document that we have to fill, but for insurance purposes, for 11-bar-1 purposes, and to make sure that everybody is
yeah,
covered on parade, has to be done. So that's set aside. We don't have an option. We don't have an opt in, opt out to that. The legislation changes annually almost to it. So the document will always be looked at in conjunction that it meets the requirements for parading
Yeah.
in the streets. So yeah, does it? It'll always be a document that will move with the times. So if
Yeah.
there is something in it that we feel needs to be modified,
Yeah.
we can lobby at Grand Lodge to have that looked
Yeah.
at. It's not a major problem because we managed to take the thing and make it into something. We managed to take the thing and make it into something that we have a fair buy-in from both lodges and from bands. That has to be a good thing.
Yeah.
That can't be anything else but a good thing. So if that evolves into a better relationship communication wise with bands, etc., then that also is a good thing.
Yeah, no, I think anything. Yeah.
You know, I feel Paul will give you a little bit of information of where our next stages with some of this comes to, where band engagement will come to the fore
Yeah.
as we go forward. My difficulty when it comes to this time of the year is finding the time to do everything, because it becomes almost a daily job.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah.
But we are trying as best we can to get the message out to everybody
Okay.
that the County Grand Lodge of Belfast isn't unapproachable. If somebody has difficulties or issues, there's a way that they can get a message to, and we will certainly engage on it.
Yeah.
But Paul maybe wants to give a little bit of what the next stages for us in our
Yeah.
engagement would be.
Well, let's talk about that, and we'll think, because one of the things that's important for me as well is, I think, is, you know, we do have a track record in terms of within the loyal orders of creating documents that are actually really beneficial for us as a whole. I'm thinking particularly of the Maiden City Accord, and you know, in terms of for me, one of the things that's a really standout thing about that document is that it outlines the responsibilities for everybody who's on parade. You know, for bonds members, for loyal order members, for spectators, for marshals, all those kind of things. It's one of those really all-encompassing documents, and I think for me, in my head, it'd be lovely to do. It'd be think about, would it be great? Not that we want to copy that kind of thing, but it'd be great to have something that was headed in that direction as well. That, you know, this idea of taking responsibility for your own behavior, you know, and I think that's also I'm keen to mention it. Some of the bonds mentioned around whenever they read this, the new version of the orders of the day, were that one of the things that they understood it was, we realize that bonds also have to take responsibility for their own actions on the day, and that can't be leveled anywhere else other than that. And I think that that's a really healthy conversation for the order and bonds to be having, and for, I think, maybe for the order to be hearing from bonds that's saying, we need to take responsibility for some of the things that are happening with us as well. And I think that that's a really positive move forward, Paul. You know, I really do. I think that that's, for me, that it was one of the first times I actually heard bonds saying, we need to take responsibility for this stuff. And I think it's always a positive move when that's happening.
It's really positive whenever people do take responsibility. Glenn, it's anything that we do, anything we produce, has a couple of considerations. Has probably the three most important considerations. The first thing is the lawful consideration. We have to be lawfully compliant. We're too big a target. We're too easy to have a go at. We're very, very heavily policed. I'm not going to go into that, because that's a podcast in itself. However, there's lots of evidence which is gathered on every parade, and especially in the 12th. Not only that, but we're brilliant internally at taking videos and then posting them onto Facebook, and people aren't really worried about what is happening in the background of that video, or indeed the content of what they're putting up. So I think, well, I don't think one of my biggest considerations for anything that we do is to make sure that the County Grand Lodge is protected, number one. But it's just not the County Grand Lodge, it's also everyone that's on parade. So it's making sure that bands and lodge members alike are given and afforded the greatest amount of protection that we can give them.
Yeah.
And that can be done in a number of different ways. The next thing is we have to make sure that our bands, who can be targets, okay, We have to make sure our bands are protected. And then the third element is we have to make sure our members are protected. And when I say our members, I'm talking primarily about the officers of a lodge. As you would know, a band is engaged by a lodge. Now, sometimes the police do take action against bands specifically, but more often than not, they'll come chasing a lodge secretary or the person who they perceive to be an organizer. So we try to protect them as well. And sometimes our orders and our specific administrative documents are constructed in such a way that we can provide that level of support and sometimes have legal input into it. Okay. Where we found ourselves last year, the Queen had a saying, didn't she? Horrible anus. Well, I wouldn't suggest for 1 minute, Spencer, it was your horrible anus last year. However,
Be careful with that there, because that's a whole different ballgame. That
that's probably a different podcast. But what I would say is, it certainly wouldn't be a year you'd look back on, would it? And you certainly wouldn't want to be reflecting on it. So when we moved into this year, the focus had to change immediately. And it really did have to change immediately. And it goes back to what you were saying about that engagement and that whole change of ethos. And we then had to think about how do we then start repairing the damage of last year? But moreover than that but how do we meaningfully be able to change the things we need to change this year moving forward? So we set about all kinds of engagement programs. We've already done quite a number of those. You mentioned communication. Our communication was terrible. I still believe, and I probably shouldn't say this on camera, but I still believe there are some bands out there that are not furnished completely with the orders of the day, that are maybe not given the band contract as they should be and having it discussed. So we need to find a way internally to be a wee bit more robust with that, make sure that that is actually done. There's loads of good stuff in the orders of the day. And one of the things that it's a particular issue for us would be that of urination in public. So therefore, the orders of the day contains the information of where the toilets locations are, where the public toilets are, where the portaloos are, etc., etc., etc. So the orders of the day can be a document if it's read in the right context, can actually give you quite a lot of information.
Yeah.
It can certainly tell you the start time.
Yeah.
It can tell you where different people form up. It can tell you some subtle changes we make with regard to marshalling, etc. But moving forward, and how do we get the 12th better this year? So to keep on that engagement piece, it would normally be expected that private lodge would talk to its band. That's expected, okay? It would also be expected that districts would engage with the bands within their districts, let them know where trigger points and where determinations potentially could come from, etc. But the county never really had engagement at their level with regard to bands. So we've changed that this year, and Spencer will chair 2 meetings that will happen this month on the 29th and the 30th, whereby North and West, South and East will be brought into a room and they can engage in whatever is topical or whatever they feel they need to raise, and we'll answer that as best we can. I would imagine that will probably raise more questions than what it provides answers, but what we can do is certainly communicate stuff across the
Yeah, but I think that is positive. The fact that that you're going to be sitting down in the room with bond reps to say, listen, folks, here's where this has come from. This is what the expectations are of the day. What are your concerns? How can we may not be able to address all of them with this one, but at least let's have a conversation around what may be useful for you in regards to that. But I do think that there's an element of, again, I'm going to end up in this word responsibility, that for bonds to make sure that they understand exactly what is expected of them. And I think the orders for the day are pretty clear in regards to that, in terms of that. And you're right, the communication level does need to go up a level. And I think that's one of the things, because whenever you have any process, one of the things I always, part of my training I do as a job is we talk about, for a process to work, there's a triangle of needs in the middle of that. And basically what you have to have some process that allows people to deal with the emotions that are related to the day. You have to have a procedure telling people how things are going to happen, but also the substantive is what may come out of this, or what are we looking to come out of this. And once you remove one of those elements, then the whole process falls apart, and it's so, and I think by doing this here, you're starting to put that communication thing back. So let's hear the emotions, let's hear the stuff, because the conversation that were had between the county and the concerned bondsman, there was emotion in the room. There was some fiery stuff that was put across, and and some really blunt stuff that was put across as well. That needed to happen. It needs to happen, and I think they realize that we can disagree well. I think that that's a really important thing. That we may disagree about something, but we need to disagree well in the sense that we need to plot something as a way forward. And as long as we can do that together, and engagement and raising the quality and the level of communication is part of that process.
I think for us, engagement's key this year, okay? And we've put a lot of effort into it already. That'll continue as it goes on throughout the summer. That also has happened with regard to some of the statutory agencies as well. And also, it's not just Spencer, in his opening remarks, talked about some of the things he did. But like I said, he sells himself short. He's in and out of City Hall. He's fighting for stuff to happen. And it's all there to either enhance the spectators' experience or indeed the people who are taking part in the parade, their experience. But I think when it comes down to these difficult conversations, no one's frightened of them, and no one has ever been frightened of them. They were maybe exacerbated last year because of the way in which information was leaked out. But that didn't mean to say that even before that, there wasn't an era whereby people could say what they wanted. I think the difficulty we had was that people were just not as communicative, as clear as what they needed to be, and so some decisions were maybe made that were wrong and incorrect.
Yeah.
What I would say is also, out of the 32 points that were put forward for the changes to be made to the 12th of July parade, there was only ever 2 that was contested. The other 30 were unanimously accepted. No one ever talked about any of the other points.
Well, that's just it. That's that's it. But the controversial stuff will always garner the most attention and things like that. There, and I think that's just part of the course. But there's also those particular points. There's an emotional connection in regards to that, and that came across very strongly in terms of how some of the private lodges displayed their, I suppose animosity is probably the right word towards some of that there. But I think, the fact that that we're now back in a process of, hey, we still need to consider this though. And I think for me, the fact that the proposal is suspended, I wouldn't even think about trying to throw these on the bus here, but I think there needs to be a discussion about the future of the 12th in terms of what that looks like going forward. So and because there are some valid points that have been made around that in regards to membership makeup, the enjoyment of the day, trying to widen its appeal in regards to a more of almost like a festival type atmosphere and other things that we could be doing in terms of enhancing. And I think that's for me is the key word. It's not necessarily about change, and some people may think that there's semantics, but I think there's a real difference between change and enhancing. I think if there's things that you can do that will enhance the experience of people who are involved in the parade and the people who will experience the parade from either a spectator point of view, that's for me positive stuff. But I think there is a discussion that needs to take place in regards to how do we make this even better, because I think it's the potential to be one of the best events that happens in Northern Ireland, with the right kind of framework, the right engagement across all aspects of our culture to contribute into what is a pivotal day in the calendar.
Yeah.
The 12th of July, to me, is always an evolving day. When we close down from the 13th morning, I'm straight away looking information back from the district lodges because of whatever incidents might have happened, whatever was the good points, whatever was the bad points. And that has always evolved throughout every year, certainly in my tenure. And I would always say that we should always look to change. We should always look to see if there's a better way we're doing something. Can we do it better? Can we improve on it? And this year, to me, is the first leg of that.
Mm-hmm.
This is the improvement to begin. We tried something last year it didn't work. The brethren didn't want to buy it, and that's
The past there. That's gone. It's out of the way. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? We're moving forward to something else.
But I absolutely think in every part of engagement that we had, there there was anger. We dealt with the anger. We tried to quell down to how it came about and what we were proposing to do. But as Paul said, we gleaned out of those meetings, the same as the engagement with the concerned bands persons, we gleaned out of those what was being said to us. And that's how we have set the strategy for this year going forward.
Yeah.
So this year going forward is solely, well, not solely, but is we want to be engaging with people again. And probably it's maybe more important to engage after the 12th, to look at it to say, well, guys, what did we get right? And what can we improve on?
Yeah.
And you know, one of the biggest concerns that a lot of people expressed to me last year was having no field, no demonstration field, and so on and so forth. And I'm sort of looking at it and saying, a demonstration field, how many people come into the demonstration field? I ask the question all the time, what does the 12th mean to you as an individual? It doesn't matter who you're speaking to. What does it mean? What spurs us on to walk to Edenderry and Barnett's now and back? What spurs us? And when people start to get the answer to that, then they start to become more in the same level as where we are. I don't believe that it's a carnival. I certainly have never believed it's a carnival. People should enjoy themselves, but enjoy themselves within reasons of what the confines of what we're doing. And that's commemorating King William's battle on the 1st of July.
Yeah.
You know, that's where we are. The 1st of July 1690, that's what we are actually commemorating and celebrating. People have forgotten that. You know, the actual basis of the Orange culture is dated back to then. And we have always tried to evolve and evolve with that. Now, do I believe we will ever get it perfect? Not at all. If you're taking 5,000 people on parade, it's a very, very difficult task.
So it is.
Very, very difficult task. And it's even more so when you've got 80 to 100,000 on the sides of the road, all participating within it. So I think we do not too bad out of it all. But we will strive to improve, and we were certainly glad to get the invitation to come along tonight to set some of the records straight. And I believe it's something is ongoing to us. We'll have to do more of it, and we'll have to get more of our people involved with the band fraternity to try and make sure that we're all sitting in the same place.
Yeah. No. I think you're right. I think, you know, that there needs to be that in regards to moving forward. It's small steps. You know, if you change everything all at once, people are gonna react to that straight away. But it's all about, how do we bring people on board with us? How do we take people on the journey? Recognizing that there's a lot of opinion that needs to be heard in regards to that, but also recognizing that there needs to be something that happens somewhere along the way. And because there's often that old saying that we talk about things even in churches and stuff. You know, the last words of a dying church are, "We've always done things this way," and the last words probably of a dying organisation be, "We've always done things this way." You know, and I think you're starting to move away from that and say, well, listen, there needs to be some rethinking. There needs to be some, you know, without losing the element of tradition that's really important. But and I go back to that word, how can we enhance the tradition? How do we make that better for everybody who's involved? Because at the end of the day, I think sometimes, and I know I've been, you'll know I've been a big critic in terms of the Orange and stuff, you know, but for me, I would say, like, I commend you on the approach that you did take in terms of engaging and listening and taking on board. You know, it surprised me. I didn't think it would happen in the way that it did. So for me, I was really appreciative of that. But I think moving forward, it is that incremental steps. Let's take it one stage at a time. Let's look at how we can enhance one element and then think, what's the next step? Where do we go next with that? How do we make that better this time? Because the other things that get levelled at the order is sometimes things that are outside your control. You know, and I think that it's important to realise that, and that's not a cop-out by any means, and that's not me letting you off the hook in any shape or form, but there are sometimes things that are outside your control, and as you've mentioned, the sheer numbers of people on the street. And some people will say, well, then reduce the numbers of people that are out on the street. That's not something it's not like it's a ticketed event. Do you know what I mean? It's not like, you're out, you go into Ticketmaster and get, here, I've got a seat on whatever road for the 12th of this year. It's not that type of event. And I think that also needs to be taken into consideration and give people a wee bit of slack in regards to that. Yes, take things seriously where they need to be taken seriously, because there are things that we need to address. But I think that there are some things that happen on the day that are way outside the control of the order and stuff like that. So, and in light of that, then, some of the issues that came out of a number of the documents, and a lot of the discussions were around certain things that have been happening. You've mentioned one about the whole idea of street urination and stuff like that was one. The other thing was around some of the antisocial behaviour stuff that was happening in light of that. And also there was mention around things like the alcohol and the drug taking aspect of it. How's that being addressed, right? What's the plans for that?
I think from the last, I've been involved as the Deputy County Grand Master and the County Grand Master for in excess of 11 years. And I've always, the single biggest problem we ever have is a return journey coming back in. And I've always had full engagement with the state agencies and the people in round Donegal Pass and Sandy Row, trying to engage to see how best we can put something there to make it a better day for everyone. Society in itself sets the tone for that, because if the weather's good, everybody's going to be out on the day. They're going to enjoy themselves, and some maybe over enjoy themselves. We can go along, we can encourage. You'll be aware of our 2016 process in the Battle Not the Bottle, which was really, really successful for us, where we put the focus on what the parade was about, and alcohol should be in moderation consumed. And that worked. That worked that year, because the statistics given back to us were purely, that shown a great decrease from the year previous or the years previous. And we continued doing a couple of processes up through till we got to COVID. COVID changed an awful lot for engagements of where we were. We would now, at this point, are looking to see where our next sets of engagements regarding that antisocial behaviour that comes there. But we in ourselves can't fix that. We have no over control of what happens out there. It's a public event. The public are there. Any public event in Belfast in particular seems to be an advertisement for everybody to come along and over party. So we need help from the general public who are coming out to watch the parade. We need some people to take responsibility for their actions. We can do quite a lot to try and help, but there are certain areas, and I think you said it, that there are certain areas that we have no over control from. The Parades Commission will go along and put a band and music, only a drum beat coming down Donegal Street. We have no control over that. But we will continue to engage to change that. We will continue to engage on all the antisocial elements that are there. But we need help. We need assistance from the general public to come into that as well. Yeah. And it's not unique to the 12th of July. It certainly happens in many other...
I think if you go... I think this is one of the things, whenever I spoke to some people in terms of media outlets in regards to Spencer Pub, was one of the things that they really they homed in on was alcohol and drunkenness and things like that. And one of my thoughts with them was, why the micro focus on this particular aspect? I said, because I could go to any event, like a concert or anything that's going on, and I can see people who have taken too much drink, who have done certain things, or certain things are happening within the confines of a public event, or an event that is happening in a particular location, etc., etc. And I don't see the outcry around that there, in terms of, or you go out to Friday night, you go into the centre of town, you'll see people urinating on the street, you'll see people who are worse for wear because they've partied way too hard. And that's an element of culture that exists within our society. And yet, yes, people are going about that, but it's kind of going, Why the specific emphasis on this particular event? And I think that some of the answers that come back to that there is because a lot of the times the way that the order is almost presented is that it's almost anti-drink, that there's an element where there's supposed to be a no alcohol policy. There's this perception that because it's a Christian fraternity, that that's something that really shouldn't be part of the day. And I think that that's part of the scrutiny. And I also think that there's an element where everybody contributes to that. You know, even on the day, bonds and lodge members all contribute to what for me would that, because that's been part of the orders of the day for a long period of time. It's been part of the contract for as you even going way back into the 80s stuff, you know, in terms of around the alcohol thing. And I think there's a level of responsibility that comes from things that going, if you're carrying drink in your vehicles that are accompanying your hang, that's not on. If you're anywhere you're disguising it, you know, you're walking along with a Coke bottle and your Coke bottle's full of vodka or whatever else, you're not really helping us here. Do you know what I mean? And I'm going to say, on a good day, I love a wee cider. Of course I do. Do you know what I mean? Absolutely, it's absolutely great. But for me, we need to be thinking about, you know, the impact that our actions are maybe having on the event as well. And I like to say, listen, everybody's going to spend the 12 teetotal. You know what I mean? But I think that's what everybody else is actually expecting, is it should be a teetotal event.
I think, look, the bottle not the bottle proved that the message coming out was not anti-drink. It was drink in moderation. You know, once a parade is finished and you're back home, do what you like. But when you're on parade, there shouldn't be alcohol carried on parade. To it, and I think the orders of the day certainly used to say that, whether they've been modified to take that out of it. So we accept a responsibility for that, but it's very, very hard to police that. And so we always adopted moderation as distinct from total oblivion. How do we change it? Again, it's engagement with people, to try and get people to see that the day is more about celebrating and remembering a victory at the Battle of the Boyne rather than just going out. I'm unsure just exactly how you would ever solve that, because the mass amount of people that you have from we leave Barnett's to we go back to Clifton Street, you know, it's phenomenal the amount of people who come out of it, and it's phenomenal the amount of people who come from far and wide in the evening time to watch the return parade. So it's going to be really, really difficult to try and convince everybody to drink in moderation. We realise that, but we can't stop the messaging. We need to continue the message in moderation. And you're absolutely right. The news media will always pick up on an incident that Paul mentioned it, that we're great at taking a picture or video of ourselves doing something wrong and posting it up on the internet. And that's going to come back and bite you. Most times that the press or the television crews or anything, they don't need to go too far. All they do is go onto the Facebook pages and they get all the information they need, which never highlights. It doesn't show a major picture of us going to the City Hall and going to the cenotaph and paying our due respects at the cenotaph. Nobody ever takes that and posts that up. But if somebody was standing beyond the cenotaph or down in Bedford Street or somewhere like that with a bottle of whatever, somebody will take a picture of that. And I think you said it, Paul, you know, it's what's superimposed in the background that then brings the bad name that comes out to it.
Yeah. No, I think that's part and parcel of the day and age that we live in and stuff. You know, this instant access to you know, the fact that in your pocket you have what would have been a camcorder, a video, you know, in terms of an audio device, whatever else, and the access to all that kind of stuff. You know, it's never been as easily accessible as it is now. You know, and I suppose that then puts everybody under further scrutiny and stuff. And like you say, but that requires us all to work a wee bit harder together to try and address some of those issues and everything. So in terms of going forward, In terms of, obviously you've got the engagement events that are coming up. It's the 29th,
And 30.
30th. All right. So if bonds members, if you're out there, you're involved in a bond in South and East Belfast, I think you're engaging with the forums and stuff, aren't you? Yeah. And also from Northwest, going to be in Clifton Street, isn't that right? There's going to be engagement there. Get involved with this, get involved. If the county are opening themselves up here, then let's get involved. Let's take the opportunity, guys, to have our say and talk to the guys here and say, listen, here's some things that we'd like us to consider, and we can all be part of the solution going forward. Which but from listening to these now, I think that that's what you want. You just want everybody to be a part of that solution. We all have major decisions to make about how this event goes forward into the future, and how we make this better, from there. So what are your hopes in terms of the future? Obviously, your hopes is for a peaceful 12th this year that passes off with as little incident as possible. But in terms of going forward for you guys, what are your hopes in terms of how we can develop things with the 12th?
Well, look, I think the first thing we should say is the 12th is a fantastic spectacle. There's literally tens of thousands of people, as Spencer has clearly said, to come to watch it. But also, people will be, the internet is flooded. I think last year we had about 60 to 70,000 people that was on our live streaming feed. So it's something that people want to see. Okay, so it's a great spectacle, even with a few little minor issues, and I do call them minor issues because if you take it in the context of the entire day, it's a fantastic day. But what do we do and how do we move forward is really, really simple. We have internalized a very specific plan for this year. We're working on a longer term, probably more strategic plan. But I don't necessarily want to go into that because that hasn't been formalized. And then the next thing is people will be asking more questions on that. But the important thing, the message about that is it's not something that just stops now. It's not something that stops for the 12th. It's something that has been internalized. We're very, very clear that we need to continue this process and move it forward. Now, again, to allay fears, to go back to your point that the review document was parked, you're absolutely incorrect. A parade fit for a king was absolutely banished. Spencer killed it, dead, it's gone. So I don't want anyone thinking that that's going to be resurrected in some shape or form. It will not be, okay? It's dead. However, that doesn't mean to say that we won't continue the process of continuous review, because we do it every year. We were doing it for the last 20 years anyway, but we're stepping that up. Every year we analyse what we do. What went well, what went wrong, etc., etc. So that there will just get ramped up a bit. And who knows, maybe next year we'll come back to our membership and bands and say, look, we think we could do this, this and this. An example of that would be, we have probably for the last 20, 25 years, certainly 20 years since we went to Barnett's, have always formed up in a particular way. This year we're changing that.
Okay.
And we're changing that to try and get some benefits with it. And we'll see how that works. If it works well, it gives us more things to think about for next year about how we do that. Now, that's not to put stuff in just for change and change. Sure. It's there to improve, to be honest with you, it's there to improve our transition time from going through Sandy Row. Yeah. Okay? That's what it's there for. So instead of having a gap between a district and the district behind of 25 minutes, then maybe bands stopping to do a bit of showboating of 35 minutes. Before you add all of that in, there's a huge gap between the person at the front and the person at the back. And it can, in some cases, be over 2 hours of unnecessary gaps. So if we can improve that, then we get people through Sandy Row easier, which is an improvement in terms of safety. And that would be a high priority for us as well. Okay. But it's not just that. That's only an example. We will continue this year to really focus on the actual review element. As Spencer has clearly said, most of our review we're led by the nose because we get letters, we get phone calls, we get video, we get all kinds of things showing us all the bad things we do. We very rarely get anybody coming up with positive comments to say, have you considered this or that? So we hope to reduce the amount of noise that we get from it, which I think this year there will be improvements purely in the fact of our engagement. I think we'll see improvements. You mentioned personal responsibility. I think there is a real awakening to that. I think we saw some of that last year as well, actually, if I'm being honest. And yet, I think when we start moving into the dark months for us, we'll be able to get into the nitty gritty of how do we progress some changes that we see fit. But one thing we have learned, and I just want to make it absolutely clear, the process by which we deal with anything like, any change or indeed any idea or anything would be completely different from how we did it last year. And we wouldn't be wrong-footed on that again. And the very fact that we're sitting here with you proves that.
Yeah, no, I think that's good to hear. I think that's a great place to I think that might be a great place to actually sort of say, you know what, let's end that in terms of conversation ways there, because I think we've covered all the bases there, in terms of we've covered, the issues around the document leaks, what they brought to us, the way that they've been addressed, some of the enhancements that are being made, some of the positive responses to some of that, and the fact that there is a plan going forward to increase the quality of the experience that we all have as part of 12th. And I think everybody watching or everybody who's involved in the 12th anniversary would say, well, that's exactly what we all want. We want everybody to have the same kind of maybe the same kind of connections, the wrong type of, because what this means to me and what it means to other people can be different, but that we all have a safe and enjoyable cultural experience together that as you say is fit for the historical event that it is, remembering. And I think that for me is always a key element in these things, is that even when we think about the 1st of July in East Belfast, for me, it's all about remembering the Somme. The 12th of July is all about is the Battle of the Boyne, and that we need to keep that at the forefront of our thoughts in regards to that this is about us connecting to a historical event, and let's give that the respect that it deserves, because if it means something to us, and it does mean something to us, because our whole society, our whole way of life has changed as a result of the outcome of the Williamite Wars. It changed in terms of a constitutional monarchy, all those kind of things that's brought the day-to-day life for us, came about as a result of the Glorious Revolution. And I think that, that's the thing that gets missed a lot, is the enhancement that's brought to life in general. We're not necessarily ultimately, yes, the battle's the part of it, but ultimately it's the change that brought to the British Isles in regards to how we're governed, how we're ruled, religious and civil civil liberty and religious liberty for all is part of that whole process. And that's what gets missed in some of the crap that people focus in on.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely.
100%.
So, listen, folks, thank you very much for coming in and talking to us on Made to Parade. I'm absolutely delighted to have a positive conversation about this, because as I said at the start, and I've said on a couple of things, I was like a dog with a bone with this thing, and for me, it's like, I'm not letting this lie, I'm going to go for this, and I'm really... But the fact that that there's been the engagement and what we have now is a hell of a lot better. Looking at what was there, and it for me fills me with confidence that going forward that we can actually do something really, really great together in terms of what the bands can bring and what the order can bring to the day, not just on the day there, but in terms of our cultural celebrations as a whole.
Yeah, 100%.
So brilliant. So, folks, thank you for joining us on this brand new season. I hope you have enjoyed the conversation there. And if you have, then by all means, leave us a comment. Tell us what you think in regards to that there. And better than that, why don't you get involved in these engagement events that are going to be taking place? If you haven't done so already, make sure you like the video, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Remember, subscribing doesn't cost you a thing, and it helps the channel get its content out to everybody else that really needs to hear it. So until the next episode, look after yourselves and take it easy.